Hello folks, welcome to Mystic Seaport. I'm Walt Ansel, the senior shipwright in the shipyard, and we're going to talk today about half models, something that we boat builders absolutely love, and hopefully we're going to go through the process of making half models, explaining them first, and then hopefully by the end of this session you'll have a chance to think about making one for yourself or coming here to join us for a class. Now, what is a half model? A half model or a half hull is a carved three-dimensional representation of a boat hull, and you'll often see them in restaurants and bars hanging on the wall as what we call presentation models, or you'll see unpainted ones which are just simply carved out of pine that were used by the builders to get the shape and form that they wanted, and they would use the model as a tool for designing and building to full size. We have a drawing here of a Whitehall boat, a small rowing boat, and this is a classic set of boat lines. Basically, you have three different views. You have the body plan right here, which is made up of slices that go across the hull, and you have the profile view, which would be if you were looking at the boat from its beam, and then the half-breadth view if the boat was turned upside down and you had sort of an eagle's eye view and you were looking down at it. So the way that boat builders slice up the shape, the 3D shape, is into buttock lines, which are these slices, sections in the body plan, and then in the half-breadth view, water lines. And those are the three different slices that are taken of boat hulls to record their shape. Right here we have a half model that is representative of the body plan, the stations that are cut crosswise in the hull, and you can see that they're spaced out evenly, and they are normally square to the water line, and you can see those slices there. Then moving on, the third view that we have right here is that eagle's eye half-breadth view if the boat was upside down, and these are showing water lines. And think about these as contour lines, as if you were looking at a map with contours on it that would show elevation. This is showing the elevations and the shapes in the hull, and you can see we have hollow right here in the bow where the water lines are hollowed out, and also in the stern.
Go for it.
So continuing on, I want to talk about builders models a little bit. And a couple years ago we built a new push boat for shipyard use out of aluminum of all things, but when I started the design for it, I carved a wooden model and a half model, and it is to scale. It's 1 inch to the foot. Now, very often builders would do that, and we can put a tape measure on there, and this is 19.5 inches, which equates to 19.5 feet, and the beam is right about 4 feet, and that's half the beam, obviously, so for an 8-foot total beam. But the builder can take measurements right off the half model and use them for his building form, for molds and frames. The builder can also put a sheet of cardboard along the side and trace the profile out and get the real side shapes. There's another method that half model builders use, and that is, we've got a little dory skiff right here with round sides, and this is very simple. There are only 3 stations, but to get that station shape we can actually slide a piece of cardboard into a cut that's been made in the hull, and then that can be traced and that shape recorded. So that's a method, a little bit brutal, that you're cutting your half model up, but if you don't cut completely, you can get the shape. There's another method too. You can use a cabinet maker's molding gauge, and you can press it into the hull at the station location, and you can get the shape by pushing the little fingers in the cabinet molding gauge, and then you can lay that on a piece of paper and you can get the shape of that section right there. The other thing that you can do with a builder's model is that you can trace the profile on a piece of paper rather simply, just like that. You can also trace the half-breadth view. So quite a great tool, as you can see, for the boat builder to be able to carve this model and really get the form that they want. This is a very unusual half model right here. It's what they call a hawk's nest model. And here you see molds or stations and then battens bent around that represent the plank lines. And this is a very, very handy tool for determining planking layout. And you can see the planks in the dead rise portion of the hull are wider than they are at the turn of the bilge, and intermediate width planks in the top sides. So the chances are that you're going to build a presentation model rather than a shipbuilder's model, or a model that you would be using for a real boat. And the boat that we're going to talk about is one of our favorites here. It's the Herreshoff 12.5 sloop Nettle, which we have here in our collection. And here's the set of lines right here. And repeating again what we talked about earlier: body plan, half-breadth view, and profile. Now, we build this model quite a bit in classes that we offer here at the Seaport. And I've got a whole breakdown and the process and the different pieces to show you today. So what we have is templates for all what we call the lifts in the hull. And you can see right there that each one of these represents a water line. And what we do is the water lines are spaced out evenly. Here they are right here in the profile view. And we cut out with a bandsaw, trace onto 1/2-inch pine, and cut out these lifts. And we clean the edges up a little bit. And then we use the offcuts from the lifts. We save those and we glue those together as a gluing jig. And then when we go to do the glue up, we lay all the lifts in to this female form. We put a piece of saran wrap so we don't glue the lifts to our form. And then we glue it up, and a lot of clamps. And we use carpenter's glue. Don't use epoxy. You want to use a glue that's going to be relatively easy on the edges of your chisels. After glue up, this is what all the lifts are going to look like after you've popped them out of your gluing form. And you can see that we've got some spilled carpenter's glue here, but no problem with getting it out with the saran wrap there. So the first step after taking the glued up model out is to put it, we've got a nice little gauge right here that we can determine the shear, that beautiful profile curve of the edge of the deck. You don't have to have one of these tools, but it certainly is handy to have. So we trace the shear there, and we'll cut that on the bandsaw. We'll also cut the stern rake too, and the bow profile too at the same time. After cutting out those profiles, This model right here is of our schooner Brilliant, so it isn't the 12.5, but it's at a nice stage where I can show you the profile look. We've got that sheer cut profile and stern rake, and with Brilliant, of course, we've got an overhung transom too. At this point, we're pretty much ready to start carving. Now, it's very hard to hold a half model, and somebody a few years ago came up with this brilliant little block that you can screw on the back side of the half model, and it's a 6-sided shape, almost like a closet pole. You can see it here in the end view. So folks, we've got the half model clamped up in the vise here in our nice clamping block. And one thing to keep in mind is with this soft, clear white pine that we're using for the model, that you want to be carving from the center out towards the ends of the boat. And what we want to be doing is taking off all the high corners and leaving little valleys where the glue lines show right here. And what I'm going to be using is a gouge, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to take off the high points. This is something that you're going to have to be quite patient with. It's going to take some time to do, but it's very enjoyable. The pine cuts beautifully. If your chisel is sharp enough, you should be able to push it by hand. You shouldn't be having to hit your chisel with a mallet. Now we have a part in the model right here where we have considerable hollow, and we want to use a chisel with quite a bit tighter radius, and it's a smaller chisel, or gouge rather, and you can see that I can come up in here and I can go across the grain slightly. When you're taking down the high corners of the lifts, be very careful as you approach that glue joint. Ideally, you want to carve the whole model so that you have even exposure on the glue joints. I'm getting pretty close right there. I should stop there. And you can see on this example right here how the glue lines are showing nice little even valleys. Whoever did this model did a really good job of taking the whole thing down evenly. A few other tools to use for half model carving is the spoke shave. And I've got an old Stanley spoke shave right here, and it does a gorgeous job. It's like a small plane with a short bed, and you want to make sure your tools are quite sharp, and check out Chris Sanders' sharpening videos at the Mystic Seaport YouTube site, and you'll get a good lesson on how to tune your gouges and planes and chisels up. There's another tool I'd like to show you. This is a cabinet maker's rasp. It's a Nicholson number 49. It has a random pattern of teeth. And these are marvelous. You can go across the grain a little bit, and you can see that it removes wood quite nicely. We don't have time to finish this model in this video, but you see where I'm coming much closer to the finished shape that we want here. And you can also use the foam sanding blocks, the sticky sandpaper pads. Those work really nicely. And for the hollow portions, you could take a little block of wood and carve a profile into it, or use a piece of dowel and wrap your sticky sandpaper around that. And you can then get the hollow points fared up too. I'm going to clean up this little part of the run here with a small gouge, and you can see how handy it is to get in this spot right above where the propeller would be on Brilliant. Very tight curve in this area right here. So we have a beautiful presentation 12.5 model that's finished right here. And the person that made this put a small piece of mahogany in here to represent the water line. It was a thinner laminate that was put in there, but with a clear lacquer finish or varnish on there, it's absolutely beautiful the way it offsets the pine. This, I didn't talk too much about material, but I got to tell you that it is worth buying #1 grade pine for your lifts, for your half model. You can use basswood also. I've occasionally seen entire models carved out of mahogany, but we find that pine really works wonderfully, and it's going to darken and get golden with age, with the sunlight and so on as the pine oxidizes. So this is a gorgeous little half model. And Nat Hershoff in 1914, when he designed this boat, he had it in his mind, and he carved a model, and then he took lines for this marvelous 12.5 from that model, and that model still exists at the Hershoff Marine Museum in Bristol, Rhode Island, along with a marvelous, marvelous collection of half models. Thank you very much for joining me today. And in normal times, we run a half model carving class here at Mystic Seaport Museum. We usually do it twice a year. And what we do is my partner Doug Butler and I glue up the lifts before the class, and then the class meets for just a day, but we do most of the carving here in the White Boat Shop, and it's just a wonderful time, and hope you can join us. Thank you.